Hey guys, day 2 of the major has come and passed, and we're going to do another quickfire recap video here. This time though, I do have a special guest. It's going to be Dualism, who specializes. She is a bit of an expert on the French scene and also Smith's #1 fan on the planet. She's going to be helping me and guiding me through some of the action today. So Dualism, if you could just kick off and let us know what your positive of today was at the major.
While I would love to say that a French team did well, they're all gone. So my praise has to kind of go towards mouse sports, I think. Sorry, I mean Mouse because rebrand.
Yes, yeah, I think Mouse looked really, really sharp. Like, obviously, they went 3-0. They had a plus 24 round difference with some legit wins. And I know that last win in particular was kind of grim for you because you were kind of rooting for Fnatic, right?
Yeah, I had Fnatic as my 3-0 because looking at what their likely path was going to be, I thought they had a pretty good chance. And I did think Mouse were going to make it through. I did have them in my pick'ems, but I'll admit I kind of underestimated how clean they were going to look early on.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, I was actually going to put Mouse as my good as well, but I do have a backup, and I definitely fully agree with you. I think also when you look at their run through to this 3-0, they've placed some legit teams. Their first game was against Outsiders. They won it 16-6. They then beat EG 16-10, made that look pretty straightforward. And then obviously against Fnatic, who looked very, very sharp themselves. Just to go a little bit further, though, I've been very impressed with some of these individual players. Exertion in particular, I'm going to single out because coming into this tournament, to be completely honest, I was a little bit unsure of what this guy was going to be capable of. He was a bit of an unknown certainty, an unknown factor, and yet he dropped a 1.71 rating against EG and a 1.77 against Outsiders. Those are huge, huge numbers that he is putting out there. So I think he's turned a lot of heads and made a lot of fans in the process as well.
I mean, 100%. And for people that follow the kind of HLTV top 20 team player listings, he was mentioned quite a lot coming into 2022 before he was on the kind of main Mouse squad and had shown his full capabilities. I want to say it was Twists, Zywoo, and Brokey that all had him as their kind of player to watch heading into this year, and I think he's definitely not disappointed on that front.
Mm. Well, that's really cool. I didn't know that. So yeah, even getting the plaudits and the respect and the admiration of his fellow pros, and as you just mentioned, those are some very big, heavy-hitting names that I'm sure he's very proud and pleased to be mentioned with. My other positive was going to be 9Z. To be honest, I think I've underrated these guys a little bit. I didn't think that they would make it through to the next stage, but I also didn't think that they were going to get completely blown out the water. Some of their performances, though, have looked pretty sharp. They did lose to Game Allegiant in their first game, who unfortunately didn't 3-0 in my pick'ems. They then beat Imperial, then beat EG, and their next game, as we can see right now in round 4, is going to be big. But I know that you had them in your pick'ems, I believe, Dualism, to go through.
I did, yeah. I felt like it was essential to pick one of the South American representatives in the first sort of South American major. Thought it would be a bit wrong not to, but I was not impressed with 00 Nation, and I didn't really have faith in Imperial, and I'm sure I'll get lovely comments for saying so. But I think 9Z just had the most convincing run through the Americas RMR for me, and none of those names are particularly eye-catching. I don't think there's anybody on the 9Z roster that, unless you're really following the scene, would know of. But they had a very well-rounded, consistent performance that I just kind of thought, as a risky dark horse, they were a valid pick. And on day one, I was a bit worried watching them get ruined by Gamer Legion, but yeah, they've only faced other teams from the Americas, and Big will be a big test for them. But I think that, of all the teams they could be facing, they have a very good chance.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's going to be an interesting and a competitive game, but one that they certainly could pick up. It's not without any reason. So moving away from the positives, getting into a bit of the negative side of things here. Where did you come down on your negative of the second day, pardon me, of the major?
Has to be those Brazilian teams that I didn't have faith in initially. the fact that they came in, both Imperial and Zero Zero Nation, as 0-2 teams was pretty daunting, and I'm kind of surprised that they were even able to get maps at times, considering how shaky those performances could be. And yes, overtimes happened, but I don't think, for most people anyway, that they seemed at all convincing, even taking those maps.
Yeah. I think I said yesterday that Double O Nation looked like the worst team at the major for me, and their performance today against IHC didn't really change my mind on that front. As my negative, I had Vitality, and I think the reason why they're negative, as far as I'm concerned, is because I had more expectations of Vitality than these Brazilian teams. So, like, the Brazilian teams having a bit of an off game here or there, or just not performing and both going 0-3, wasn't necessarily hugely surprising to me. I expected Vitality to have a pretty comfortable and fairly convincing challenger stage here, and the fact that they've lost to Gamer Legion now and now Outsiders today, but it's more the nature in which they've lost that really does concern me. Today, losing against Outsiders, Zaiwu dropped 28 kills and had a 1.61 rating, and they still lost 16-12. Everyone else on the team was 0.89 rating or lower. We're going back to that same kind of problem that we've seen from Vitality in the past, where it is the Zaiwu show and very few other people are helping him out. And that is a concern for me. I've got to be honest, Dualism. When I was watching that game, I'm thinking, I don't know if this Vitality team's going to go a huge distance in this major off these performances.
I think the issue with Vitality is the fact that they have struggled and disappointed for the majority of the time that they've had this roster. Yes, they've had some incredible highs, but even before the major, they played the Blast, I want to say Fall Showdown. I forget which one comes when, there's too many of them. But they lost to Astralis, who didn't have config and were having to bring in, I want to say, one of their Astralis talent players to just kind of fill the void. And they lost, and it was a bit of a surprise, I think, considering they should have been the stronger team there. So I think coming into the major and still not really finding their footing. Again, Spinks is still new. It's only his second event with the team, but the other four players that have been there for so long, yeah, as you say, Zaiwu. He is very much performing. Apex shouldn't be the second best performer at the major behind him on this team either, and I think that more fingers should really be pointed at the likes of Dupree, who should be stepping up and being that kind of the glue that can keep Vitality together versus what he's doing now.
Absolutely. And just to go a step further than that as well, you have Zonic behind him as the coach. This is a legendary figure, obviously, had so much success over the years with Dupree and Magisk. So it is a huge surprise. Plus the fact, when you look at the stats, a team of Vitality standard, they are negative round difference. Yes, they're 1-2, but you'd expect that after that first win against Imperial, they 38 rounds win, 41 losses, -3. And when you consider one of those games against Imperial, one's against Gamer Legion, no disrespect to these teams, but you're expecting Vitality to do a hell of a lot better. They do have Greyhound in the next game. I don't want to say it's a gimme because I made that mistake when Cloud9 played them, but I do think that's a fairly favourable best of 3 that they're going to be kicking things off with. So with the positives and negatives out the way, what's your indifferent kind of feeling coming out of this first day?
This may be something of a hot take, but and because they went through today, but I'd say Bad News Eagles.
Interesting. Okay. Why do you think that?
They're a team that, I'll be honest, I've not really been keeping too much of an eye on between Antwerp and now, but I looked it up beforehand, and they've played 74 maps since Antwerp, and not including the RMR, and only 5 of them were on LAN. And those 5 maps were at some small Czech event against, I think Sinners were there, and then 2 teams I've never heard of. Those were their only LAN games since, and I think that there wasn't really a lot to go on. There wasn't a lot to hype them up, and there wasn't a lot of reason to doubt them. And I think it made them kind of that. Yeah, them going through is cool for them, and I'm happy for them. But they did only beat Zero Zero Nation, and then Big, who have a stand-in, and then Gamer Legion, which yeah, sure, notable, but they managed to avoid all of those heavy hitters that could have probably given them a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, and Game of Legion today, to be honest, I was very keenly watching that game because they're my 3-0 pick. They didn't show up at all. They had a really, really flat game. And the first map being Ancient, this is a very good map for Bad News Eagles. They typically do well on this, even against some of the top flight teams. Just massacred them in the second half. Game of Legion never showed up to that Mirage. It felt like they were out their depth a little bit. Maybe some of that inexperience kind of played in. You have to remember that other than maybe Acor, the rest of this lineup is very new in terms of playing tournaments at this level and at this stature in front of these kind of crowds. And so I think it showed itself a little bit in that performance. Interesting though, Bad News Eagles, I didn't have them down as my Indifferent, even though they did go 3-0. They actually had the best round difference as well so far. But I can see where you're coming from sure. For me, my Indifferent one was EG, Evil Geniuses, because watching their games, their first win was against IHC, who've barely scraped by and not 0-3'd. They then lost to Mouse, all right, fair enough. And then they lost to 9Z in a very close overtime performance. And that brought out Max dropping mad frags and playing really well. But when I'm looking at this team, I'm just thinking, like, this is the perfection for me of a 2-3 team fodder. That a team that's probably not going to make it through to the next stage. They also have Cloud9 in their next best of 3. And I'm looking at some of the individual performances of the likes of Cirque in particular, who obviously has come under a lot of scrutiny over the years, the Bulgarian that had an explosive start and then kind of fell a little bit flat. I just look at his team and I'm like, Nealon is doing so much work, but I just don't see where they're going to do anything in the future. I don't see how they're going to bust out here into the legend stage. I feel like they're going to just 1-3 now. They're against Cloud9, and that's with Cloud9 in a really rough spot. So I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're good. They're just kind of meh for me right now, EG. I don't really have any feelings one way or the other towards these guys.
I think that's fair. I think a bit of praise has to be put on Vorborg, who is their coach, because he came from Copenhagen Flames, who, as we've seen, a lot of their players are kind of spread around teams that are at the major. And other than Hooksy, who, with G2 didn't quite make it over the line, I think a lot of those players have gone on to do very good things on the teams that they have found themselves on. And I think his presence for EG has, can't say that for certain, but I think probably has had a good impact. And I've only seen positive things from the players about their experience with him. And considering past shaky coaching experiences, I think that there has to be some credit there for him at least.
No, I think that's definitely fair, and I hope that they prove me wrong. I hope that they do get some success. Cloud9 are obviously super shaky, and although they did 2-0, if you just look at the 2-0 scoreline, I know you and I were both watching this game. Let's be honest, Imperial choked 2 maps in a row. They had vast leads, 15-11 and 15-6 leads. Another day, Cloud9 are eliminated, and EG are playing Imperial, so I can't be sure that Cloud9 beat EG, but I'm not exactly blown away by EG's performances either, so we'll just have to wait and see. However, that is us done for today's episode. Thank you very much, Dualism, for joining me. I really appreciate your company, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. I'll leave Dualism's Twitter and everything in the description box below, so go show her some love, and, well, we'll see you in the next episode, guys. Peace for now.